So let's get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to moderate this session. First of all, thank you for joining us today. I am Professor Jin Young Kim from Korea University, and I teach economics, family economics mostly at the university. And as I said, I'm very much privileged to moderate this session. Here we have three distinguished speakers for our panel discussion. Each of them brings extensive research expertise on topics like fertility, family, and gender, along with real-world policy experience. I'm very excited to hear their insights on population dynamics and their assessments of Koreans' fertility challenges. So let me first introduce our speakers. So to my left, we have Dr. Willem Dema, a senior economist at the OECD Social Policy Division. And next, we have Professor Stuart Gichel Boston. Am I pronouncing correctly? Professor of Social Science and Public Policy at Hong Kong University of Science Technology. Lastly, we have Professor Gunnar Andersson, a professor of demography at Stockholm University. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for participating in this session. I'm happy to moderate this. And I understand that each of you has prepared the presentation slides. So we will begin by listening to your presentations. And then after each presentation, I will ask you a few follow-up questions. So that's how we will proceed. And so without further ado, let me first start with the Dr. Dema. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thanks to the KCCI and the Chosun Ilbo for inviting me. It is not the first time that I'm in Korea, but it still is a great pleasure to be here. It is a very interesting country with a lot of interesting change going on. You will hear from me some things you already have heard from other speakers. I'm thinking about the one of the most entertaining keynote speeches I've heard for a while. Professor Kim, that was really good. I was in awe. That's the only word to say. Of the interpreters, because you spoke at machine gun fire speak, and how they managed to translate that in English so quickly, I do not know. I hope to do better, but if I speak too fast, I hope the interpreters will alert me. Right, what we do at the OECD is, and you've already seen much of our data earlier this morning, is make international comparisons based on data and try to come up with policy recommendations. I have made a short presentation. There's much more work in this area in the OECD, but I'll stick to the short presentation that I prepared. This you know, the fertility rates in Korea are the lowest in the world, and that's why Korea is the little blue bar on the left-hand side of the screen with a fertility rate of around 0.7 in this chart. I know that it is estimated to be 0.65 this year. And you can see here by looking at the black diamond above the Korean bar, that in 1980, the fertility rate was close to 3. If you look on the right-hand side of the chart, you will see some countries which still have a fertility rate which is above the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman. And these include South Africa and Saudi Arabia. And the only OECD country which has a fertility rate above the replacement rate is Israel, because it has a population group of ultra-Orthodox Jews who still often have 6 to 7 children per family. So that helps keep up the fertility rate. But you can also see that in South Africa and Saudi Arabia and India and Indonesia, the fertility rate has fallen compared to 1980, and that is projected to continue. There is protection work in the Lancet released earlier this year, which suggests that in most parts of the world, fertility will actually fall below 2.1 children per woman, except for perhaps some countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So there will be a balance in population globally, which will have implications for the future phase, but also for geopolitical situations. One which we haven't heard of too much this morning is the rapid increase of childlessness among women in OECD countries. Here you will see the black dot, that is the childlessness, the share of women who are childless of the 1935 cohort. And the bar, or the column, shows you childlessness amongst women who were born in 1975, i.e. who are about to turn 50 years of age. As you can see, Korea is not the highest here. Korea is, sure, childlessness, the incidence has doubled, but it's not the highest. It's around 13-14%, about half of what it is in Japan, where it is 28%. But also in European countries like Italy and Spain, where it is close to 25%. But of course, the fertility rate in Japan is higher than in Korea. And that is because once Japanese women do have children, they're far more likely than their Korean counterparts to have 2 or 3 children. So that explains the higher fertility rate in Japan vis-à-vis Korea. Now, the reason why Korean women often have 1 child is, of course, related to the cost. And we've already discussed that this morning. The cost of education in Korea are exceptionally high compared to other OECD countries. And this is related to the intensive after-school Hagwon participation of many, many Korean children. The other one, which is actually interesting, and we haven't discussed this morning, is the financial independence of young people. This chart shows the share of young adults, and young here is defined 20 to 29, who are living with their parents. And you can see that in many countries it has gone up, because the black diamond shows 2005, the bar shows 2022. But you can also see that on the left-hand side is Korea again. 80% of people in this age group live with their parents. That is not very conducive to having a family and children. So this is an issue that you have to think about. It's higher than in the OECD average, which is around 50%. And on the left-hand side, you see the Scandinavian countries where youngsters, by and large, still live on their own. but fertility rates have gone down there too. I'll get back to that in a minute. Right, so we've done some regressions on this issue based on data that we have across the OECD. And what are the factors which affect the total fertility rate in these regressions, which we can, provide some econometric evidence for it all. The indirect costs for children are important. That is, if you have a child, you often stop working or reduce your earnings and pay a career price, and that opportunity cost has increased markedly with education levels. There are direct costs of children. We've already discussed the cost of private education. The one which shows up for Korea, but not across the OECD. But what shows up for all OECD countries is the cost of housing. So that is an important barrier to having more children. Positive associations with the TFR are related to male and female employment. Obvious reasons that the earnings that are generated are needed to be able to finance a family. And public policies such as parental leave, early childhood education and care, and also financial support either in cash or through the cash system have also a positive association with the fertility rate. But these regressions do not explain all the variation in the fertility rates across countries. So there are other factors at play, and they are important, but I can't evidence with hard-nosed evidence their importance or the size of their effect. And then we have to start thinking about things like insecurity. There's been a continued bunch of crises over the last 10, 15 years. The financial crisis of 2008-9, there's been COVID, Ukraine, the current situation in the Middle East, cost of living crisis. In short, a lot of financial and more general insecurity. And that never helps fertility rates. There is a change in norms. Young people, and in Korea certainly, because they've seen what their parents went through in order to raise them, realize how difficult and how costly it may be to be a parent. And they may not feel confident enough to do so. At the same time, they may also think that they don't need children to be happy. And that is a shift in norms which you can probably do very little about, but it's potentially quite effective in reducing the fertility rate. Gender norms are important. Countries with more gender equality have higher fertility rates. Now, why is all this important? Fertility rates and sich are important, but it has also implications for the face of future society. And as we've already discussed, I think it was Professor Kim who mentioned this, the ratio of people over 65, senior citizens, to the working age population is getting very equal in Korea. Whereas Korea used to be very young. This is again the dark blue bar. Now, not now. In 2060, and that's the black diamond, there will be one person of working age and one person senior citizen. And that, of course, has all sorts of implications for the financial sustainability. So what can be done about that? Now, apart from trying with policy, with work-life balance supports discussed parental leave, childcare. Policy should continue to support parents to have the children, or people I should say, have the children they want at the time that they want them. The structural policies to address the structural issues around the cost of children are important in that way. But labor market issues, Professor Burns was already quite clear on that, are very important, particularly for Korea. The dual labor market, sharp dichotomy between regular and non-regular workers, the long working hours, although the drinking of soju after work seems to have diminished, but there are commuting times which are large. There is very little time for regular workers to devote to family life. And non-regular workers also have to put in a lot of working hours and don't have the money to establish a family. To reduce the labor supply issues, of course, with the aging of population, there will be more room for youngsters to enter the labor market. But you also need to increase your working life. That means that you have to increase health policies to have healthier workers who at present retire too early at 60 or are invited to retire well before that by their company. Policies to get mother returners back into work after having looked after children, i.e. increase the underrepresented groups in the labor market, and women is one of them, and make better use of the investment they have made and their parents have made, you have made, in their education. Other than that, we've touched this morning on the issue of improved labor productivity. The other one, which in Korea has been not as used as in many other OECD countries, is the development of a coherent migration policy. In most OECD countries by now, 1 in 10 of the citizens are foreign-born. That is far less in Korea. And so you have some room to improve your performance in that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Willem. I'm very intrigued by your finding that the social norms may play an important role in this fertility dynamics. Because, for example, in Korea, most of the fertility policies are based on these reducing the cost of childbearing. Finding that other social factors can play an important role, that's quite interesting. And I know that you have been working on the Korean issues lately. Published the book about rejuvenating Korea, right? Did you have any particular policy which may be effective in case of Korea?
Well, as you know probably better than any of us, Gary Becker was in his seminal work helping people with the cost of children and raising children can have a positive effect. But of course, if preferences change, then for an economy, that makes it a different story, and that's where the norms can come in. The thing is, as I said, we've tried to get significant econometric evidence on that, but it hasn't come out of the model yet, otherwise I would have shown it. But I still feel that there is a role for there are so many unobservables which play a part in the fertility trend that social norms and the change therein between generations will play a role. In terms of policies for Korea, the cost of education is one aspect. Any policy towards reducing that cost is good, or reducing the competition for places, having another sort of entrance system into universities, you know, make the qualification easier for students rather than the very competitive fight for the very few places in what are deemed to be the best universities. So stories important to do that. What I would like to emphasize is that it's not just one policy, you need a package. And Sejong City might be considered an example. The fertility rate in Sejong City is higher than in other places in Korea. And why is that? Because the people who live and work in Sejong City are civil servants or researchers. They have good employment conditions, so they feel relatively secure in that. The house prices in Sejong City are not as high as in the rest of the country, and they have a perfectly good education system over there. So it's the package of measures to address different issues: the cost of education, the cost of housing, the employment conditions that could have an effect. But don't expect the fertility rate to go back to 2.1 children per woman. You might be able to raise it, you may be able to increase it, but it's not realistic to expect that the replacement rate will become the norm again in Korea.
Thank you very much. And let's move on to Professor Gitten Bassen. So it's your turn.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Kim, and thank you very much, everybody, for inviting me here today. So I will take a slightly different approach, and rather to talk about how we might reframe this issue. And I think a lot of this links back to what Professor Kim talked about in his keynote, and Professor Williams as well. So the way I feel that we talk about low fertility at the moment is in this kind of crisis mode, right? That we tend to think of low fertility as a problem. That is the problem in and of itself. We have to solve low fertility because population aging, population stagnation, decline, we're a bit frightened of this. This is caused by low mortality, and we don't want to increase mortality, so the only other demographic lever that we have is fertility. So we have to fix somehow low fertility. And of course, as Professor Kim pointed out, this has not particularly worked. A lot of money and a lot of effort has been put into fixing fertility, and it just keeps on going down. But instead, I think what we need to do is move away from this approach because it gets very depressing and it gets very dark. And what we actually need to do is instead look at the TFR, or more particularly, look at the gap between aspirations and reality. We know people want to have more children than they end up having. That in itself it's not a problem, but it's a symptom of other problems. It's a downstream consequence of various institutional malfunction in society, whether or not this is in culture, in work, in the education system, in housing, in planning, whatever it is. And when we look at it like that, and instead of taking this top-down macro view, but we actually talk to people, we talk to young people and individuals, then we find out that actually these are choices which are rational responses to the universe in which people are living, working, falling in love, and living their lives. But when we do that, that means that, of course, just childcare is not going to fix it. Just money is not going to fix it. It will be we have to look holistically at people's lives and their hopes and their expectations and their aspirations. So we have to look at across all of society and not just in, let's say, family policy or in employment policy. So this you saw, I'm sure, in the news. This is a big deal. We now have this new train, which is very fast and cuts off the commuting time from Seoul out into the far suburbs. And I got a few phone calls from journalists saying, look, now everything is about the fertility rate in Korea now. Even the train is now about the fertility rate. It's just the train, right? This has got nothing to do with the fertility rate, right? But actually, it does. And I was quite sympathetic to the land minister, who's actually saying, you know, that this matters. Right? And actually, these kind of policies do matter. If these are policies on commuting and on travel time, policies about work-life balance and culture, yes, they do make a difference. They do matter to this. But, again, that's why we have to look holistically at this, because, again, as Professor Kim mentioned before, if we just have faster and faster trains pulling everybody into Seoul, and if the price of housing in Seoul it just keeps going up, then you solve one problem but create another. And also, the other danger, of course, is that if we don't reform work culture, then your boss might say, oh, it only takes you 20 minutes to go home. You can stay for another hour at work, right? So you don't actually fix the problem. You don't solve the problem. But it requires thinking in an all of society systems way. So how would I propose we move into a new mode? How can we respond to this so-called crisis? One thing which Korea, I think, has done successfully in the past, and I hope doesn't go back into this direction, is to reject simple pronatalism, to reject targets, to reject simply saying, have more babies, here's some money, have more babies. In the worst case scenario, this actually has the opposite effect. It's damaging. It alienates and ostracizes precisely the people who you want to bring in to the conversation. And then, of course, as we see around the world, in the very worst case scenarios, and that's why I think this panic about it can be highly dangerous and very counterproductive, is when countries around the world push back on sexual and reproductive health, on rights, and on and impose conservative gendered norms in the household. So I think we have to move away from the crisis mode. The second, I think, is that we've got to be much stricter on what we're saying the problem is, right? So if we just say, well, we're worried about aging and we're worried about stagnation, but what actually is it that we're worried about? If we're worried about pensions and the viability of pension systems, then let's talk about pensions. If we're worried about rural depopulation, then let's talk about rural depopulation and what that really means. And when we do it like that, we find out that having more babies is not the solution to all of these things. Having more babies is not going to fix the pension system. Having more babies is not going to repopulate rural Korea, because in the future, if there's still nothing there, they're going to move to Seoul again. So we just get stuck in this system. We need institutional reforms, not demographic reforms. The third thing is we have to really, I think, and this is it from the International Conference on Population Development, we know this for a long time, we have to release the full potential of everyone in society. It's crazy to me that we are around the world pushing for more babies when there's not the work, or when we have high youth unemployment, high levels of underemployment, we have a low retirement age in many parts of East Asia. What we need to do is to build a better labour market, a more inclusive labour market. It's not just about working longer, right? It's about working better, decent employment for all, involving lifelong learning, active ageing, and improving productivity. But then, last but not least, we shouldn't forget about fertility. We shouldn't forget about low fertility, but instead go back to seeing it as an individual crisis, an individual problem that people are not able to meet, or don't feel they're able to meet their own aspirations in work and family. And the way we do that is not by frightening people, it's not by cajoling people, it's not by harassing people and by alienating people. We do that through gender-responsive family policy and improved labour market policy. And of course, as we've all said, that's not something that the government only can do. This has to be driven as much by the private sector as anybody else. And that will require giving things up. It will require bosses and management to actually say, yeah, you know what, you don't need to work all these hours effectively for free. It will mean paying for somebody to substitute when a worker is on parental leave. It will mean bosses who had to sacrifice their own family life to get to where they are, maybe saying, well, you don't need to do the same thing. You will do something different. It will mean husbands at home working better in child and domestic work and in care roles at home. So it will require giving up. But that's the thing. We can't just get in a panic and then say, well, we're not going to make these sacrifices, because we will have to make these sacrifices in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stuart. It was a very interesting perspective you're raising, especially the low fertility is not a consequence of various, it's just a consequence of various malfunctions in society. That was interesting. And because of time limit, let me just have a quick question about Hong Kong. Actually, Korea is now contemplating to adopt this foreign household helpers. And do you have any thought about that? Whether it's going to be useful for Korea, or any downsides, or any?
Well, I think, yes, so in Hong Kong, in Singapore, we have many migrant domestic workers who take a key role in childcare. Of course, this can be a way to supplement the childcare system. But I would say, you know, and of course, if we go down that pathway, then ensuring that workers' rights are protected is incredibly important, and that migrants are properly treated and integrated into society and protected by government and by the law. This is incredibly important. But then there are two kind of slight things we need to step back and take a look at, which is, number one, there is, I think, a myth that there is this limitless pool of labour around the world, which are going to come to places like Korea to work in care, right? There are only so many Filipino and Indonesian people who are going to want to come to Korea, right? And so I think we have to realize that there's not a kind of limitless supply of labour, and that the jobs that we're offering have to be good enough to compete in this kind of global labour market. The second thing, though, is to think of the bigger question is, well, why do we have this gap in the first place? Why is it that we're not able to fill jobs in the care sector? And that's because the jobs in the care sector are not very good. It's because the salary is not very good, the pay is not very good, and most importantly, I think the dignity is not very good. You're not being treated with the respect that you deserve when you're working in the care sector. There's not professional development in the care sector. So instead of saying, okay, well, let's just bring in people from around the world who are going to accept these poor jobs, who are going to accept these poor working conditions, well, why don't we improve the jobs? Why don't we improve the working conditions and actually make it a sector? Because it's an extremely honourable sector to work in. Why don't we make it a sector that pays decently, treats people properly, guarantees people's rights, and enables people working in the care sector to have a dignified job? That's what I would suggest.
All right, thank you. So lastly, we'll have Professor Anderson. I'll give you enough time, so don't worry about that.
Okay, thank you. It's a clock that is ticking here, so, but then I will not feel stressed. Thank you for having me. I will try to discuss some of the structural factors that contribute to and may cause very low fertility and not so low fertility. And I'm from Sweden, so I will use the Swedish case and a lot of research I've done on the Swedish case and relate it a little bit to the situation in Korea. But before looking at the causes of fertility change, we can have a look on these two diagrams that shows the consequences of fertility change. So the impact on population age structures, and we have Korea and Sweden here. And these age structures look very differently. The age structures, they are produced by changes in mortality, migration, and fertility. But it is really fertility that is the main and the driving force in shaping population age structures. So in the case of Korea, we can see from this diagram that there has been below replacement fertility for several decades. So it's nothing that happened just now. It has been going on for several decades. And you can pin in this upside-down pyramid, and you can see a generation, and then you go down 20, 30 years, and then you see that the child generation is much, much smaller than the parental generation, and it's a narrowing base. So this is quite a dramatic feature. In the Swedish case, we have had close to replacement fertility, all the time for 100 years. And then we have a much more stable population age structure. You can see that there are some bulges, some bellies in the population age structures, and these are caused by previous fertility swings. So we have had some ups and downs in the fertility rates in Sweden, but on average, it has leveled out, and then we have cohorts who have very stable cohort fertility, where the number of children that people reach at the end of their reproductive career has not changed. So the fluctuation has just been around the average. And then I put in a red line in this diagram, which is, it shows a little bit. I put it at age 65, which could be around retirement age. And then you can see that Korea is just right now starting to face the consequences of this population age structures. You have very big cohorts that just right now are about to retire, and they will be replaced by cohorts at their ages 20 to 25 that are much, much smaller. And of course, this will put tremendous pressures on the labor market and a lot of strains on the labor markets in the Korean case. So then we jump on, and I will put a little green arrow here, and then talk a little bit what are the causes of fertility patterns. And my take, it is really the possibility for people to maintain two stable incomes, two working careers at the same time as you have small children. So the reconciliation of the two roles of working life and family life. And for this to happen, there are a lot of factors that need to work in tandem. They can work in tandem to make it more difficult or make it more easy to combine working and family life. And these are then social policies, but they are then also then has to work in tandem with what's happened within the families and what happened at workplaces and in the labor markets. And then we can be a little bit more specific. Yeah. So the social policies that are important, it is really the parental leave system and the child care systems. In the Swedish case, then it is, the standard pattern is that when a small child is born, then the mother is at home 1 year on parental leave, and after that, the father is at home half a year on parental leave. And then the mother and the father return to their previous work where they worked before with the same kind of work conditions that they had before. For this to be possible, then of course there has to be available of childcare, and there is low-cost availability of childcare in all municipalities in Sweden. So, and I know that in Korea there has been a lot of investments in parental leave and childcare system, but in order for that to work efficiently, then it has to go in tandem and in harmony what happens within the family and what happens at the workplaces. And we can, move on to the next bubble, and that is the family relations, which is then gender relations and also relations between the generations. So gender equality is shown to be positively related to fertility rate if you compare to, just on the aggregate level between countries. And Sweden and Korea are on the opposite poles, both in terms of attitudes to working mothers and fathers, but also to gender relation in the family and also to gender relation in society at large. So, and of course, childcare helps to make it possible for women and men to combine family and working life, but then also if both parents collaborate both with the work and the joys of having the small children, it makes the family life much more easy. Another issue is that of generations. So I think in Korea there's a lot of pressure from older generations to conform to conservative family models. There's a lot of pressure on marriage. And it is also a fact that from comparative research in the European setting, that countries with a very familistic system, and there is only the strong marriage model, these are the countries that have low fertility and low marriage rates because it doesn't fit to everyone. In the Nordic situations, there we have a pattern where people leave the parental home relatively early, age 20, 21, and then it's a relatively long period of family formation where people can form families with more flexibility and more autonomy and less pressure from parents to conform to certain family patterns. And then you can form a family in different ways. So most of children in Sweden are born to cohabiting non-married parents, but then later on, eventually most people marry, but they do it without pressure from the family, and also there is no policy discrimination between cohabiting and married couples. So I think this is also an important factor. So, but last but not least, of course, the labor market structure, the workplace culture is essential. So John Williams spelled out very well the working culture in Korea. And of course, if you have to work 10, 11 hours, it's impossible to combine that with picking up small children at the childcare centers. And that is also then the Swedish workplace cultures are very, very different, and it is really adapted to the needs of parents with small children. The normal working hours in general, it's about 8 hours, but then it's also accepted that parents with small children, they go a little bit early, maybe the fathers and mothers take turn to pick up the child at childcare. And when office workers, there are different types of works, but office workers, you never plan any joint meetings outside the very core working hours, so that the employers also take care of this. And since also employers, senior business people take parental leave, then there is also an understanding that having small children is part of the life, and that we have to accommodate for that to keep our workers. Yes, I don't think it's a panic, but I will, even if there's a red sign here, but I will show one consequence that from this, the Swedish setup on fertility outcomes. And we have very good demographic data in Sweden. I've done a lot of research on different structures and patterns in fertility, and this is a favorite diagram that I think is very illustrative on the social inequalities in patterns in childbearing. And this is the level of childlessness in Sweden, which is around 12-13% for women, and then by educational level. And based on Swedish register data, I picked up a cohort of women at age 30. And then we can see at age 30, the high-educated women were more often childless than the low-educated women, which may not come as a surprise for an international audience. But then if you follow this cohort of women over the life course until the end of the reproductive career, then these differences totally disappear. So it's only a matter of timing. The low-educated women have their children earlier. The highly educated women have their children later, but there are no differences in childlessness and in ultimate fertility between the educational groups in Sweden. And this shows very clearly that there is not a need for choose between a working career and a family career. You can have both in this setting. And the same goes if we do the same diagram for rural and big cities. It's also in the big cities you start childbearing later, but then you also have the same convergence, that there are no differences between fertility patterns in the big cities and where housing is very expensive and the countryside where housing is not expensive. So then I will conclude with a caveat. Since 2010, we have also had a fertility decline in Sweden and in the Nordic countries. So this comes as a totally new development, and this cannot be explained by any structural factors. It cannot be explained by worsening economy. It cannot be explained by any policy cutbacks. It cannot be explained by any reversal of gender relation progress. So, and it is nothing that is specific to Sweden. It happens in all the countries in the region. It happens in all Northwest Europe. It happens in the US to the same extent. And we connect this to more the impact of increasing global uncertainties in the world. So uncertainties that give a sense of insecurity about the future, because to start a family, it is a future-oriented project, and you need to have some prospect and some confidence about the future. So this is a very interesting development, but since it is subjective factors, then it's more difficult to pinpoint with registered data what is driving this, and we are collecting survey data in the Generations and Gender Survey, where we try to link different subjective factors to fertility ideals. And Stuart does the same for Hong Kong. So yes, but we can still see, Joan also put up the case that women and men during this period have become very dissimilar. But it's not the case that the couple formation doesn't work. We can see in the data that, strange enough, I must say, but people move together and form cohabiting couples just as before. But then they stop. They don't move on to become parents when they are cohabiting couples. So this is a new development. But still, even if fertility rate now is going down in the Nordic setting, there is still not a reason for Korea to work on the very basic structural factors that prevent people who want to have children to make it possible to combine a working and a family life. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Gunnar. You read my mind that I was very interested in this reversal, the trend reversal in fertility in Sweden. So you were saying in your opinion, it's because of uncertainty, future uncertainty.
Yes, it seems to be an impact because it happened exactly the same in the neighboring countries. If you do the TFR, the fertility trends of US and Sweden, year by year they move exactly. So it has nothing to do with Sweden. And we can also see within Sweden there are no differences between social groups, there are no differences between big cities and countryside, no difference by migration background. It's like a big hand that is affecting everybody, not only in Sweden but also in the neighboring countries.
That's an interesting finding. I think it can also shed some light on the Korean situation that a lot of people are worrying that the uncertainty can be worsened in Korean economy. So thank you very much for all three speakers today. I really learned a lot from your insightful discussions. I hope that everyone here feel the same way. I guess I feel a little sorry about time. We didn't have enough time, but I look forward to further discussion over lunch. So here is all we have for this session, and thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much, gentlemen.